Today's moderator is Bob Safian, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce him. He'll be introducing the other speakers on the panel. You know, it's wonderful what Bob has done to help us with design. I mean, this issue, the Masters of Design, is evidence of that. But Fast Company has really become a place where design is explained to a much broader audience than ever in the past, and that's fantastic. You know, Bob is now the editor of Fast Company, but before that he was executive editor at Fortune, and a long resume at Time Inc. He served as executive editor of Time and managing editor of Money. So over to Bob Safian. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the nice words. Hi, everybody out there. If you're not too tired, it's not too early. This is great because it's a nice, intimate room and space, and you're going to be treated to some really great individuals here. And I hope we can have as much conversation that goes back and forth. That's one of the great things about this space and this group. And let me go and introduce them. I'm going to start one in here to introduce Rick Fedrizzi, who is the president and CEO and founding chairman of the U.S. Green Business Council, which is the organization that has brought us LEED certification for buildings and other things, and is also a recipient of a National Design Award this year for corporate achievement. So congratulations to you. It seems like the right place to start. To his left is, and to your right, is Chris Hacker, who is the Chief Design Officer for Johnson & Johnson. Chris was a recipient and honoree also with the National Design Award for Corporate Achievement in 2004 when he was at Aveda, and Aveda was recognized. So you have two of your panelists are National Design Award recipients and honorees. So that's a pretty good place to begin. To my immediate left here, your right. I'm trying to keep my lefts and rights correctly. Is John Bradford, who is the Chief Innovations Officer at InterfaceFLOR, which is the third largest carpet manufacturer in the world. Is that right? I'm trying to remember my facts right. And really, Interface has been a sort of a pioneer in the meshing of sustainability and design, in product design and otherwise. And John, if I remember, if I have this right, that you have a machinery design background, right, in mechanical engineering, but now your role is more that of a systems designer, essentially processes and the way things work. And then finally, here's Kevin Kramer, who's the president of Growth Initiatives at Alcoa. Now, Kevin is not a designer, right? But is sort of more of a CMO in charge of growth at Alcoa. And Alcoa and your task in some ways is looking at design and sustainability as a growth option and also as an area that should be more fully understood and more fully discussed. Is that right? Have I got all you guys set up? Everybody clear? Okay, great. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to ask them some questions. We're going to chat a little bit. If it's anything like what was going on here at the, in front before we started, they're just going to start talking to each other. But really, after a few minutes, I'd love to, have some questions from you guys and have this come back and forth. It is one of the great things about this setting that it's intimate enough and you get to have access and interact with this conversation. And I thought I'd start with something very basic. Okay, the theme of this is business and design and sustainability and design. And I thought I'd start with something very basic and start with you, Rick, to help us explain. So what is sustainability? It's a word that's used for a lot of different things. So in the way the U.S. Green Business Council thinks about things, what is sustainability in your world?
Sure. The U.S. Green Building Council.
Sorry.
I just want to put that out there just because the organization is focused at the transformation of the built environment, looking at our buildings, looking at everything from the smallest affordable residential home to the tallest, most expensive, maybe the Bank of America Tower is one of the best examples, 55 stories, LEED Platinum, all the bells and whistles. Everything that's out there, these buildings are where we spend 90% of our lives, and as a result, I would say over the past 30 or 40 years, these boxes that we spend 90% of our lives in have treated us very poorly. Air quality, lighting quality, materials, a lot of these things, you know, and I think we lived in an era of low bid for a long time, and so we're lucky these things got built in the first place. But the idea that they were inspirational, healthy places of true value that respected the human, the economic, and the environmental side did not happen. There's a very formal definition of sustainability. There's also a lot of movement around the idea today that sustainability maybe communicates a baseline of just hanging on to what we've got today, sustaining what we have today. You know, the textbook definition basically says that, you know, you want to ensure that future generations have the ability to have what we at least have today, and use do no harm as a part of that. But I really think what we're talking about today is transformational living, taking every idea we have today, and to the design community, you know, you are the architects of the future. Your ideas are advancing every single aspect of what we do call the modern sustainability, or the green movement, and that is helping people understand that through advanced design in architecture, materials, processes, systems, and so forth, you have the ability to have a much healthier, much more vibrant and connected existence.
And if I'm not going to get the facts exactly right, the number exactly right, but a very large proportion of greenhouse gases and other things that are created are from buildings or from the construction of buildings. So this is an area that was, before you guys made this a focal point, was really looked at in quite this way, right?
Sure. The building industry is essentially the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. People think it's the transportation side of it. It is not. It's buildings, and it's not necessarily the design and construction part of the buildings. It is the operation of buildings. So when you consider all of those boxes that are out there, and I mean that only in the way of helping people understand that this is.
That's right. We're in a box.
We're in a box right now. It's a gorgeous box, and it would be only more gorgeous if there was a wall of daylight. You know, that would give it that. Don't tell Tom Bain I said that.
Or a wall of aluminum.
Or a wall of aluminum. But those are the things that this is a very serious business for the environment. But and I hope we get to the point where we can talk about it. This wave of focusing on green building and our next steps here is creating jobs. It's creating economic development. It's getting people excited again about the world that we live in. And so I think that this is nothing but the rebirth of a very exciting time.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to have Chris talk. Chris is a little under the weather, so if you have trouble following him.
Yeah, I hope you can all hear me okay. I have a little bit of a cold.
So at Johnson & Johnson, what is the definition of sustainability there? You know,
well, it's interesting. The Johnson & Johnson has had a thing called the Credo, which was written in 1942, that was about the business plan of the business, which was to take care of people and doctors and patients. And that was number one. Number two was take care of the employees of the company. And number three was take care of the planet and do good works. And the fourth one was, oh, by the way, if you do all three of those above, number four, which is make money, will happen. So sustainability has been defined since 1942 as taking care of the environment, taking care of the planet. The way we describe it now within the company, all of those things that you said about sustainability, but we're trying to make the products we make, the stuff we make, lighter on the planet and with as little waste as possible. And making it so that consumers get the most out of what we're selling them and not throw away a lot of what they get from us. So we're trying to minimize the footprint of the company in the way we do it.
Now you said something to me when we talked briefly yesterday about how sustainability isn't just green. Can you explain?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what sustainability ultimately is about, and in these times when there is a much broader focus. When I first started doing this about 10 or 12 years ago, there were very few companies who were thinking about sustainability as part of their business model. And the idea now, though, is that there is a huge economic benefit. There's a kind of triple bottom line that happens that allows companies to do well in making sustainable decisions. But also there's a social aspect to it, which I think is an important part of what many companies are thinking about. J&J in particular gives away about $600 million in services and goods and money every year to social causes. And one of the things we're trying to do is marry this idea of social good with sustainability at the same time. So the example of that is a project we're doing in Brazil where we are helping a group of people called the catadores, who are people who are very poor, who are essentially manning the dumps and taking care of the trash in the cities in Brazil. And we're trying to help them get organized in a way that makes the material that they recycle and the material that they bring into their recycling places do good, both by raising money for their families and their children's education and the way they live, raising their standard of living, but also producing a higher quality sustainable material, which is actually hard to find in Brazil. So this allows us as a company to buy a material after having supported the project at the beginning, buy a material that we can then use and support the catadores going forward, getting us a material we need to make the products we make in Brazil and do it from a sustainable point of view.
And it's local, so you're not going to ship it and use all that other fossil fuel around and all.
Right, and it's just, recycled material is a tough thing in many parts of the world. It just doesn't exist in the way it exists in the United States, although it should be better in the U.S. as well.
All right, now I'm going to turn to John and sort of ask you some of the same question about what sustainability is. At your company, particularly a company where the product is an oil-based, often, right, product, and I know you feel very passionately and strongly that we should be less dependent on fossil fuels, and yet your whole company is sort of predicated around that. So how do you work that out?
Yeah, for us, our past was actually predicated on every material that we make comes from oil, and everything that we assemble pretty much comes from oil or is transported by oil, unlike an Alcoa or someone who uses minerals more so. But so this is an imperative transformation for us, because sustainability for us means breaking the oil addiction. And how does that happen inside a company, inside a system that was built before Interface was ever really created? And there are really three components to that inside the company. The first is closing the loop. Seems simple. Everybody has been talking about recycling forever. But we really only recycle a very small portion of the plastics that are being used today. Most of those go straight to the landfill. So, and especially in durable goods. Durable goods are those that are made to last forever. They end up in the landfill and stay there. So we need to close the loop to kind of keep those circulating, and meanwhile work on the energy cycles for our processes, as well as different plastics that may be coming from sugar-based products such as PLA, or there are ways to make nylon and vinyl and other plastic materials from bio-based products as well. So there's a transformation in place inside Interface that looks at those three avenues and tries to balance where those are. There's really no absolutes. None of us know how big the landfill is, or how big the microbe world is, that world that we would leverage probably the most for our energy, or how big the proverbial cornfield is. If we did, then we would know how much recycling we needed to do, or how much energy we needed to extract from the microbe world, or how much bio-based products we could produce to gather a balance. And that's where most of our design comes in.
And your chairman, right, I mean, sort of had an epiphany about this 15 or so years ago.
Yeah.
And Ray Anderson didn't say, oh, I'm in a business, it's a dirty business in a certain way, so I'm not going to do it anymore, right? He
Yeah.
more sort of said, how do we innovate and change it? And, you know, I guess in some ways it's 15 years further down the road, and yet you're not done yet? I don't know, is that, you know, how do you think about that process?
Yeah, well, if you look at how we built our economic system, or our engine, you know, it's built on a mining industry that took 40
You're talking about as a
years.
planet, as opposed to
not just our we're attached to that system, and every other company is attached to that system. So that infrastructure almost, you know, it almost predicates what we do. So we have to actually rebuild an infrastructure so that we don't use the old infrastructure, the one that's in place and is kind of predicating everything, all of the business activity. So that's what we're doing. We actually start a recycling business, and then you have to slowly build that business up to meet the demand and then meet market needs. When the economy crashes, you know, you have to make those adjustments to different ways to almost leverage that business was against the oil price. And if you don't do that, what happens is we're all on this roller coaster on the price of oil and the apparent scarcity of oil. And if we don't make this transformation to a labor-based economy, then we're going to ride that oil roller coaster to the top and to the bottom. So from a business standpoint, it's actually a resilience move. We're trying to make this transformation from an oil-based business to a labor-based business before it becomes an acute need. And we think that labor will certainly be more stable than oil over the next 30 years. I think that's probably a pretty good bet.
All right. So now, Kevin, it's your turn. Now you're at a company that is a natural resource company, and so as we were talking about some other things, you could get tarred with other brushes about other kinds of things. How do you guys think about sustainability? And there's some new ways that you've been thinking about it more recently.
Well, I think, Bob, when we look at sustainability today, it's obviously different from the last 122 years since Alcoa really invented the aluminum process. Ours is a tough challenge, quite frankly. We're a large user of energy. We produce a lot of our own energy, everything from coal-fired power plants to hydro plants around the world. And yet, since that 122-year history, and similar to my colleagues, it is about the communities we operate in, and what are we giving back to them to make sure we have a safe, clean environment. How are we helping the community in various charitable activities? How are we supporting our people? How are we training them, keeping them safe, etc.? Our customers, all the stakeholders involved, has always been part of what we try to do. But I think to your point, what we're trying to do differently is partly getting our message out. 75% of all the aluminum ever produced is still in application today. Not just what Alcoa has produced, but the entire industry with virtually no downcycling. So building construction with Rick's focus is a perfect example. It goes back into the same use phase. We can look at aerospace, we can look at transportation, you get the same story. So part of that conversation then is to talk about recycling. It only takes 5% of the energy to recycle aluminum versus the 100% when it's original. So there's a great story around the efficiency of aluminum in recycling, again, with no downcycling. But the other part of the story is both around use phase, where we can lightweight vehicles, where we can lightweight aircraft, where we can make buildings more energy efficient, where we can make laptops run cooler. So there's a use phase benefit, and then of course there's a great aesthetic of aluminum. Unfortunately, we're not looking at a lot of aluminum right now, but in so many other applications, some of the most magnificent buildings, some of the great looking wheels. I always have to pitch wheels because I used to run the wheel business. When you look at consumer electronics, when when you look at appliances, when you look at where design then takes this great material and makes it both functional and makes it great looking. So part of it is telling our story, but also adapting to clearly the future is so different than obviously the past. And that if I can try to point this out, that there's more opportunity for material, things that are already in use where the materials could be shifted to aluminum from other materials that are being used today. Absolutely, Bob. And again, that is part of our history and our tradition. It's all around innovation. The first use of aluminum was in a tea kettle in 1888, and it was made out of pewter or tin or steel. And now you fast forward again, some of the references I already made as far as aircraft, autos, trucks, building, consumer electronics, etc. So that is the key challenge for us. And also being very open, it's also a price issue. It's a cost issue. It's a total value that we're trying to project, because our material oftentimes is very expensive in comparison initially to PET, to glass, to steel, to copper. So our challenge is both to get the total value conversation out on the table. In fact, where can you have a recycling value and benefit? Just another quick stat. 10% of an auto's weight is aluminum. 50% of the recycled value is aluminum. So that doesn't even speak about the use phase as far as improving fuel economy, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So the challenge is having a relevant value proposition to make sure that when we in fact are substituting, the whole conversation is articulated, which is our challenge. So thank you. And so as all of you are talking, I'm thinking that it all sounds so logical and so good and so simple, right? And yet, Rick, you and I were talking before, and you were talking about Tom Main, who designed this building, and conversations you had with him and with others about their frustration, maybe, with some of the requirements for LEED certification, getting to a certain level. In 10 years, the U.S. Green Building Council has gone a long way. What of that process has been easier than you thought it was going to be, and what's been harder? I mean, it sure seems like everyone wants their building to be LEED now. It wasn't that way in the beginning, right? And you must get a lot of push from some people to sort of adjust those rules so that everything looks better for them.
Yeah, I mean, what we're fundamentally doing is changing the way that one of the largest, most financially viable industries on the planet does business. And you know, I mean, the gentleman, a good friend of mine, David Gottfried, who had the idea to start the U.S. Green Building Council, you know, David said, you know, if we get this right, we're going to change the world. And I almost thought he was a lunatic. I'm thinking, okay, Gandhi changed the world. I'm thinking of these, you know, individual players, but how's this organization going to do anything like this? And I watched over time this absolute acceptance of the idea that architecture, residential to commercial, can no longer be sculpture, quote unquote. It can't just look good. Everything and every piece of it has to perform to some level or another, because we live in a time where we don't have the ability to randomly design buildings with massive windows with glass that doesn't perform to protect the individuals in the building first and foremost. All of the rest of the systems in the building are either much larger or much smaller based on the glass quality, the lighting quality, the mechanical systems. All these things work together. So really helping to transform the ideas from a very established industry that we need to first and foremost think about performance. I mentioned just an example. You look at the beautiful, I would call them architectural scrim over your head. And I thought maybe it was made of aluminum. I'm not sure, but
we can check.
You know, maybe 20 years ago, a similar system would have been installed, but it would have been purely for the sake of design. It would have been beautiful. But the way that this is designed today, people are actually looking at the acoustical properties of it. They're looking at the way that the light comes through that and filters out into the room. It may in fact have a certain benefit relative to air conditioning or heating, the way that the air comes on that and then disperses equally throughout the room and then drops. you know, a simple, beautiful treatment like that today has all kinds of performance characteristics along with that. And when you start to realize that every single piece, from the interface carpet under your feet to the kind of aluminum or the aluminum that is surrounding the structure, all of the properties that you experience in a building today, lighting, mechanical systems, materials, wallboard, everything, including, you know, the structure itself, the site it sits upon, everything is thought out in a very thoughtful way. And it's the integration that we are now, I would say we're not done yet by a long shot, but I would say 60 to 80% of the design, architectural engineering community really understand that this is the only way forward. It's no longer, we're pushing the ball down the hill now, not up the hill, which is really
now,
cool.
You mentioned Gandhi, right?
Yes.
Now, it's not like when you started this, or when you joined on, you didn't say, I need a celebrity spokesperson. Like, how does, you know, an idea that is a good idea, but could often be looked at by the business community as earnest and more expensive and not necessarily something we want to try, how does that get filtered to the point where it can have the kind of impact that it's having now?
We in the very beginning of the launch of the council 17 years ago, we did a very bad job in the marketing side. And I'm ashamed because that was the responsibility I had for the organization to try to market us. But essentially, we kept pushing the green story. It was all about the environment. We care about the environment. We want less greenhouse gases. We want clean air, clean water. We wanted this environmental story. And for 7 years, we did a lot of outreach to the business community, because we figured if a CEO or a COO could make a decision that this could happen very quickly. And for 7 years, it was crickets. Nothing. People didn't care. People ask me why I'm traveling so much and doing this right now. And I said, I remember the first 7 years when the phone didn't ring, when it was an irritation for us to even have this discussion. And then we sat around and like, why is this not working? These buildings are really tremendously performing buildings, not only environmentally, but from a business perspective. On the bottom line of your balance sheet, these buildings will perform. And then we said, you know, we had the wrong message out there. So we actually started developing business cases, case studies, and then leading with the business case. The minute we started leading with the business case, and I'm guessing everybody in this room knows that no project gets green-lighted at all until you've made a viable business case. Once you've done that, all of a sudden people are more interested in listening to the second part is the human side, the human health aspects. And
but
third, we speak environment through the
connection was not through altruism or saving the planet, it's saving money.
It's saving money first and foremost is what really got the momentum
drives things
this
drives things forward. Yeah. Now, Chris, you used an expression with me about how sort of sustainability and green can often be used as a PR tool.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily real. And I can imagine within a company of the scale of Johnson & Johnson that there's an impulse to do that, right?
Well, I would hope J&J doesn't do that very often anymore. And I think there was a point where that could have been true. But I think the issue is that sustainability has to be built into the process. And you have to start with sustainability as a way of thinking about your work. And J&J actually, as I said earlier, has had a long tradition of this, but got religion, shall I say, when the single largest customer of the consumer products division, Walmart, made a decision to change the way they thought about sustainability. And the minute they told the salespeople for J&J that they weren't going to buy anything that wasn't done sustainably, I had and it's amusing because Walmart's always been the Antichrist for me. But is there anybody from Walmart? I hope nobody. But in any event, Walmart has changed the paradigm because they decided, for reasons that I'll let them explain, but they made a decision that they wanted to be sustainable and that they wanted to pursue that, mostly economic. And the reality is, once you begin to do this as a company, there is an economic benefit that is highly valuable. I'll give you an example. We changed a box of Splenda and we eliminated a little flap on the outside of the box, and we saved 1/10 of the amount of paper that we use for that particular box. And it saved $700,000.
You make a lot of friends that way.
What?
You make a lot of friends.
I make a lot of friends in the marketing department because we're able to put that $700,000 into other things. And so the economics of this are not unimportant. It is really important to have the economic message be clear. On the other hand, if we as designers and creators of products aren't thinking about it from the beginning, we have no chance in actually getting it done. So it has to be a mindset that is driven not so much by the money, it has to be driven by the altruistic view of doing good and doing the right thing, but that it turns into money is a good thing.
John, you were telling me a story about a particular product that Interface does, tactile, and your sort of effort to try to remove glue from the process. And I don't know whether that was originally for financial reasons that you wanted to remove the glue, or where that came from. Can you tell us a little bit about what that?
Yeah, well, so our carpet is glued down, or was glued down in its life cycle. And that makes it harder to bring back, makes it harder to recycle. Got glue in the mix, it's just, it's a problem. And we have a process we use called Biomimicry, where we ask Mother Nature for her solutions. And so the idea was that if we could just eliminate glue, somehow redesign glue, then we would create a much better system for recycling.
So you got all your chemists together?
So yeah, we got all the engineers in the room and all the chemists in the room, and we had a biologist there, and we posed the question, how does Mother Nature do glue? And this was a kind of a new process at the time, and we sent this small group, small team of people. Actually, they were chosen on purpose. A researcher, a person who spends their whole life learning more and more about less and less, a business person who wants to learn less and less about more and more, a designer wants to explode the options, an operations person wants to restrict those, an evangelist tells you what you should do, a scientist tells you what you can do, an engineer wants to control nature, and a biologist wants to learn from her. So we put all those people into a room and have a really good fight. And after that, they go off for 3 months and they bring back the answers that nature has for that question. And after 3 months, this group came back and there were no answers.
No answers.
They showed us all of these things. They showed us, you know, a burrow and a lizard's foot and flies' feet and how flies stick upside down and all of these wonderful, cool things, mussels and, you know, every attachment mechanism in nature. But we couldn't really see the end in that project. So we sent them back off, and I took a little small group of engineers off to the side and I said, okay, I want you guys to redesign glue as well. So we had 2 teams running at the same time. The engineers came back with a contraption that had about 28 moving parts and wild. I can say that, I'm an engineer. So. And this group came back again with really all the same things. The leader of the group, who was actually a chemist with a biology degree, two undergraduate degrees, so she could have these battles inside her own head and never say a word, said, we're asking the wrong question. Nature doesn't do glue. Nature does gravity, and gravity works. And so the best design, the aha moment is, the best design is not designing in control. It's usually designing out a bad design, right? Because we're taught in school, I was taught in school that if you just apply enough power, you can go to the moon, right? That's what engineering is about, leveraging power. Designers are taught that if you can control that color and you can control that the continuity in this wall, that you will make a perfect interior. And yet, if you close your eyes right now and you pictured the place on earth that you felt most alive, I bet it's not inside, it's outside. And the reason for that is because your brain works in a certain way that has a hard time concentrating when cycles and patterns are in play. You're trying to pick up the pattern. And when that's happening, you can't focus on what's going on around you because you're subconsciously trying to decipher the patterns. We're taught in chemistry that if you add just another molecule, that you can make the product slick, or you can make it hydrophobic, or you can make it do whatever you want
it. We get too complicated.
Right.
And with this, you sort of figured out a way to make it simpler?
It's simpler. So nature finds the elegant solutions. She uses 22 amino acids and about 6 elements that are very abundant. And her system is a lot more complicated than we can really comprehend.
And so
she finds the elegant solution that always begets the next innovation.
And so you took this idea of gravity and you applied it, and basically you're not using glue at all?
Yeah, so now this system came back, allowed us to use
Thank goodness it's not aluminum,
right?
He's not using it all, right?
And now the carpet assembles with no glue, so we don't reinforce gravity anymore. We make the carpet so that gravity works, and now you can bring the carpet back. But also this has become a platform for innovation. Now I have a node every 50 centimeters in the building, so I can apply an RFID tag to that node. I can make the building smart with that node. I can apply underlayments in healthcare that could break a fall and reduce the propensity to break a bone or a hip by 90%. It became a platform really for more and more and more innovation. And that's how nature works. That's what we see in nature. The system is looked at as a whole, and the elegant solution is the one that's promoted.
Now, Kevin, thank you. There's a fruit company in Cupertino that started using more aluminum in their products, right? You were talking to me about sort of transitions that your business has gone over the last year or so of thinking about the way you market, or your markets for your products are different. Can you talk to me about how that came about? There's some research you did, and then we'll go to some questions because I know we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, about 6 or 7 months ago, we decided to do some consumer research in both consumer electronics and beverage packaging here in North America. We've been supplying into those industries. We basically invented the aluminum can 45 years ago, but we never had the point of view from consumers. So we worked with a firm here in New York, Consumer Eyes, who I worked with previously, to take us to places where we really haven't gone before. And it's not just the one-way mirror focus group work, but it's going into homes, it's going into retail channels, it's going to designers, and it's going to different places where Alcoa, and sometimes it's a little bit of a leap of faith, sometimes we talk about it all starts with the dirt, to start to talk about consumer research in a very meaningful way. And so what we really took away from that is around, again, we haven't told the why aluminum, and certainly not the why Alcoa story very efficiently, some of the things I mentioned in my earlier comments, but also where does it really enable designers, and where does it enable engineers and marketing people to change the package, to change not just the aesthetics. Can you keep beverages colder? Can you keep them hotter? Can you take certain consumer electronics companies' products to a very, very different place? And so some of the aha moments, if you would, had to do with design schools, had to do with design communities. We've worked with the designers. I'm sure maybe the title wasn't the tea kettle designer back in 1888 that we met with, but we've been talking to designers and auto companies and aerospace companies and furniture companies, but we haven't talked to the people that have to think about design initially. And why does our material get a consideration? Why is it compared against steel, plastic, glass, now carbon fiber, and many, many different applications? Well, part of the answer is we haven't been relevant. We haven't been in front of these people, this morning notwithstanding. And so that was this consumer research where it again was one of these, we should have been thinking about that. We, again, is a great example, John, that you gave, that sometimes we have such a myopic view and we just have to go like heck to get the job done and make sure we're crossing T's, dotting I's, doing it in a sustainable way, etc. But when we take it all the way to the consumer and we don't have a brand like Johnson & Johnson, and we're really not going to develop a brand that's going to help laptop manufacturers sell more of their stuff, but we need to understand what consumers are worried about, what consumers need, what designers have to have and what they don't have to have. So that's where this research work for us. Look, at the end of the day, it was about selling more stuff, so let's be clear about that. But the takeaway of how to sell it in a very different way and how to communicate and engage in a different way, that was a big deal for us.
Now I have a whole slew of follow-up questions, but I'm going to run out of time. So why don't I go to this group? Does anybody have questions here? Is that hand up in the back there? Yeah.
Thank you all for such great, for your great talks and share. I have a question for any one of y'all. So many, or you could argue that today still there's a lot of companies that view sustainability as, something they have to do because I guess it's the right thing, or or just sort of a pain to do. And that some companies see sustainability as actually a great business opportunity as a cost saving strategy. What would you say to companies who are sort of ready to look at sustainability as more than just a cost saving strategy and as an innovation or a growth strategy?
All right, so the question is about convincing companies that are looking at it just as cost cutting to being something more growth oriented.
Well, I'll be glad to take that. I think your point about many companies thinking of it as a PR opportunity is certainly true. There are a lot of people who do sustainability by press release, and they talk about whatever their sustainability programs for the future are going to be, and that becomes their image in the process. I think the way companies have to think about sustainability is truly a use of the materials, the logic of what we make, and the waste that we generate as being something that's important for the future of the planet and for our children and our children's children and our children's children. And companies that think about that in that way get there more quickly. Although I have to, I go back to the cost benefit issue as being the way to convince the managers at the top. You mentioned Alcoa did all this work because they're going to sell more products. And ultimately, businesses are in business to sell more products. And what my goal would be is sell more products that are better for the planet and figure out how to do that. And do that by thinking about the way the components of the product and the way they're made and the way they're not made so that they're doing better for the earth.
Just a quick example, if I may. There's a large manufacturer in Cleveland, Ohio, where I live, who I've known for many years, in very similar industries that we're in, and we did a benchmarking. They came to us and asked, how does Alcoa sell more stuff in a sustainable, responsible way, and why does it matter to consumers and customers? So this company really didn't understand really the starting point, and they didn't understand how they had to, in large part, get their house in order, but more importantly, help their customers get theirs in order as well. In other words, where do you help improve efficiencies? Where do you reduce energy costs? Where do you, in fact, design parts that can be easily reassembled and recycled and go back into the same use phase? So I think I don't want to oversimplify it. It's basically finding someone you want to work with and try to benchmark, and this company saw us doing a pretty credible job. And so I think that's, in large part, how the conversation has to continue.
Also, I think that in the early stages, whenever sustainability is about conservation inside the company, you develop a real appreciation for the material. And when you do that, and you take that further, that appreciation for the material extends beyond the walls of the company, into the customer's hands, into the final use phase, into the landfill, and beyond. And those become boons of innovation. So I think it's a progression. I don't think it's someday the switch just turns and now I want to go to the next
Oh,
phase.
it's definitely a journey.
It's a journey. It happens the more you learn, the more appreciation you gather for the material.
And not to be left out, I just wanted to add. I just want to add that we live in times when this is still all nice to do. We are moving towards a time, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years where this will be must do. I think CEOs of corporations across the world, around the world, will be held accountable. And this is something that John's boss, Ray Anderson, has pointed out very strongly over the years. They will be held accountable for the amount of CO2 emitted by the processes by which they build their products, transportation issues, water issues, employee health. All of those things will no longer be just something that is kind of pushed somewhere down in the organization. It will be a very visible part of their operating strategy.
Rick, on that note, I have a question. You
Yes.
mentioned the global angle.
Yes.
And there was an article a few weeks ago in the Times commenting on the challenges of reaching the different levels of LEED certification.
Yes.
And they also commented on how different the European regulations are. How do you converse, collaborate with our European friends, or how does that all happen?
Right now, it's really interesting, and for those that didn't hear the question, is how do you now bring this story internationally related to the LEED rating system and how we think about this rating systems or transformational design around the world. Right now, LEED is used in 130 countries. We have 3 formal countries: India, Canada, and Italy, who have licensed it fully from the United States. And we have about 16 other countries that are demanding it. They want LEED, and it's not that LEED, first of all, I want to be very clear, LEED is not a perfect system. LEED was developed as a system that would grow and change over time as new ideas and technology and materials, whatever was eventually brought to the market, that LEED would have the ability to embrace that and then ultimately further and further advance the performance of buildings. What we're seeing is South America, Asia, parts of the EU, Eastern Europe, well, everywhere in the EU except the UK. UK has a rating system called BREEAM. It's very nationalistic and they're very attached to it. We are really advancing an idea for people to understand that integration of the design process and how the true integration delivers a much better end result. We're also taking this next idea of LEED, no longer thinking about the footprint of the building and advancing into communities where the real benefit happens at the community scale. And a lot of that is coming from the Europeans that inherently think in terms of communities. So we see this is it's a groundswell of interest and activity all around the world at this moment. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Other questions? Yes.
This is mostly for John, but I mean, I'd love to hear what everyone else's thoughts are. You mentioned switching from an oil-based company to a labor-based. It seems like, I guess, an observation is it seems like using recycled materials would help in terms of not having to import oil and using what you already have. And that leads me to think that, or ask, I guess, what are your thoughts there? What are your thoughts on the importance of sourcing all your materials as locally as possible, even in terms of like just from within your state, or how, you know, from the local ecosystem and how that affects sustainability?
Yeah, so the question for those of you who didn't hear was in the transformation to a recycling world, what is the local leverage? How does the locality of the facility play in that? I think if you play this game out, what you get is smaller and smaller manufacturing systems that are locally attuned, you know, to what's in the area. But we all also have about 35 years of plastics in our landfills right now, and we can't seem to decide that it's a good idea to not be using the oil and learn how to mine the landfill. And I think that transformation is the one that converts, you know, from an oil-based economy to a labor-based economy. That means a couple of things. That means smaller manufacturing facilities. That means less travel. That means more agile machinery, flexible machinery. So when I learned to build a machine, every assumption in the machine design world started like this: assume that raw materials are abundant and consistent. That was the number 1 assumption in every one of the machine design problems we got. That's not a good assumption anymore, right? And so those things, they get a different design, and that design has to get some momentum before this infrastructure can really change. So I think it goes local. I think it gets smaller. I think it's got less capitalization and much more agility. So I think it's the aim.
Another question. I think we probably only have time for one more. Is there one more? Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Alice from USGBC. I'm just curious on your thoughts on the passive house movement, and if that's something that you're looking to incorporate. There was an article in the New York Times recently about a homeowner in Connecticut who had a house built that way. It was very interesting on the reduction in energy consumption that's sort of building.
Absolutely. The passive house movement, the ability for a house to basically use no energy. I mean, this is through heat capture and natural ventilation and solar photovoltaics and maybe a few extra little benefits. You've got this off the grid, beautiful, way to live. I think that is something we are definitely looking at. That certainly all of those elements in our Lead for Homes program will in fact advance you further towards the goal of what we have as our highest level right now, which is LEED Platinum. When you think about a true passive house, it's actually beyond LEED Platinum. I mean, it really is this ability to use nothing. And in fact, some of these houses, actually a building I was at the Adam Joseph Lewis Center in Oberlin College day before yesterday. And that building was designed to be zero energy. It's actually producing more energy than it uses right now, and it's putting it back into the grid. And I think that's where we need to go. I think that if in fact in the last 10 years, LEED is only affecting 6% of the market today, we've got 94% more to affect. I think we've got a pretty long stretch before we get to the point where people readily adopt the idea of passive. But that's certainly something that we fully respect and are driving people towards. The more that we can get great examples of that, those are the case studies I told you about before that are so important. If we get great case studies, people live vibrant lifestyles, and oh, by the way, they have no utility bill. They have very few medical bills because people are healthier and feel more productive and energized. It's a win-win, and the communities win as well.
Well, I think we're at the time, unfortunately. I want to thank all of you guys for your questions and your time, and I want to thank all of you. I'm struck by the combination of both your passion about all this, which is infectious and exciting, and also your sort of realistic assessment that this is a journey, and for all that's been done, there's still a lot more to do, and I think that's energizing also. So thanks very much, and thanks everybody else.